Station 1. The Triumphant Entry into Jerusalem. Palm Sunday. When Jesus came into the great city of Jerusalem that Sunday, Palm Sunday, the crowd was excited and restless. Many had heard of Jesus' teaching and miracles. They longed for a leader who would help them drive the Romans from their land. As Jesus rode through the city gates on a young donkey, the people cheered and praised God. They waved palm branches, which were the sign of kings. They shouted, "Hosanna! Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord." As they began to throw their cloaks and palm leaves onto the ground to pave the way for Jesus, their hearts were full of expectations. Station 2. Jesus at the temple and cursing the fig tree. The next day, Jesus went to the temple to pray. He began driving out those who were buying and selling, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those who were selling doves. Jesus said, "Is it not written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations'? But you have made it a den of robbers." The following day, Jesus went to a fig tree for some fruit. He found no fruit on the tree. He then told the tree that it will never again produce fruit, and immediately it withered. Jesus reminded the disciples that when you have faith and believe, there is nothing you cannot do. Station 3. Jesus is anointed at Bethany. 2 days before the Feast of Unleavened Bread, Jesus went to visit Simon the leper who lived in Bethany. While he was there, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on Jesus' head. Some people started to criticize the woman and say that it was a waste because the perfume could have been sold and given the money to the poor. Jesus said, "Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing for me. You will always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. She did what she could. She poured the perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial." Station 4. Jesus washes the apostles' feet. Jesus lived in a hot, dry climate. Most people traveled from place to place on foot. It was the custom to welcome visitors by washing their dusty feet in clean, cold water. Normally, a household servant did this. When Jesus invited his apostles for supper in the upper room, they were surprised by what happened. Jesus took off his outer clothing and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his apostles' feet, drying them with a towel. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his outer clothes and returned to his place. "Do you understand what I have done for you?" he asked them. "I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet. You should also wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should also do as I have done for you." Station 5. The Last Supper. Holy Thursday. The Triduum continues. On the night before he died, Jesus had supper with his friends. After they had everything they wanted to eat, Jesus took some bread and gave thanks to God for it. Then he broke it and said, "Take, eat. This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." He also took a cup of wine, gave thanks to God for it, and said, "Drink this, all of you. This is my blood, which is poured out for the many, for the forgiveness of sins." Station 6. The Garden of Gethsemane. Holy Thursday. The Triduum continues. Jesus knew that soon the soldiers would come to arrest him and he would be sentenced to death. He went to a garden called Gethsemane with his friends and asked them to keep watch while he prayed to God to help him. But his friends were tired and they fell asleep. In the darkness of the night, Jesus felt very alone. Even so, he trusted himself to the Father's care. Station 17. Peter denies Christ. After Jesus was arrested in the garden, Peter followed behind at a distance behind the soldiers who took Jesus away. He waited in the courtyard outside the high priest's house. He sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. Someone said, "You were with Jesus of Nazareth," but Peter denied it. 2 more times that night, Peter said he didn't know Jesus. Then the cock crowed, and Peter remembered that Jesus had said, "Before the cock crows, you will disown me 3 times." Peter went outside and wept bitterly. Station 8. The Passion. The soldiers took Jesus first to the high priest's house, where he was found guilty. The chief priests sent him to Pilate, who agreed to have him crucified. Finally, they led Jesus away to the palace. They put a purple robe on him, then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on him. And they began to call out to him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they whipped him and pretended to bow down to him to mock him. Station 9. The Crucifixion. Good Friday. Soldiers led Jesus outside the walls of Jerusalem to Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. A crown of thorns had been placed on his head. They nailed him to the cross and fastened a notice on it that read, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews." While they waited for Jesus to die, the soldiers cast dice to see which of them would have Jesus' robe for themselves. When Jesus became thirsty, the soldiers offered a sponge soaked in vinegar. At 3 o'clock that day, Jesus died. Station 10. The Burial. After Jesus had died, his body was wrapped in a linen cloth and taken to a tomb built into rock in a beautiful garden. When they laid him to rest, they rolled a stone over the entrance of the tomb.